Good morning, everybody. So excited to be with the ever lovely and amazing and beautiful Brenda Lee Jones. And what a journey that she has had, and so fun to see. I've known Brenda Lee now for over a decade, which is crazy to think that in our most infant times, she saw something with what we were all doing. And she'd been in the year of the business quite some time at that point. And we're going to get to that story. But Brenda Lee, you ready to rock and roll?
I am.
How are you?
I'm good.
All right. So good to be with you. Yeah. Hey, so just give us just a little bit. You're such a champion of everything that we do, from morning meetings to, a lady who has really lowered her guard in all the different crazy stuff that it seems like that we do, and then just watch your extraordinary success. But if I recall, I just want to say this one thing, and then I want you to share just a few thoughts of how long you've been in the business. But when you joined Everest, you had sold a maximum per year of homes. What was the maximum number of homes you'd ever sold?
Probably 10.
Right. I thought it was like 7, 8, or 9, something like, but 10, less than 10, right?
Less
and then
than
today, I look at, yes. All right. But today I look at what you've done, what you're accomplishing. It's extraordinary. You're on track for well over $400,000+ this year. And I just think it's an incredible journey. And then I look at the fact of the amount of abundance and wealth, the investment properties, and all the things that you've done, and your greatest and latest and greatest new addition to your platform of fun and exciting things is your new ski boat. So I saw you getting that thing when you're posting pictures this year. So good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So Brenda Lee, give us just a little bit of background. How long have you been in the business, and just a little bit of background about yourself and where you're coming from, and where you grew up, and maybe just a little bit of background about you.
Well, thank you for having me this morning. So I had an interesting story. I bought my first home when I was about 19. And the gal that helped me buy it, I was not impressed with her sales skills and anything else. And I was young, I was 19, but I thought, oh my gosh, if she can do this, so can I. So I got that itch for buying homes and selling homes way early in my career. Even before I started, I knew I wanted to. So I was about 23, and a friend of mine said, if you could do anything you want, what would you do? And I said, I'd sell homes. He went to Stringham, signed me in the course, handed it to me for my birthday, and said, you start Monday. So I'm very grateful that someone said something in me. That's how I started. Yeah. So I got my license when I was about 23, 24. I was raising 2 little boys. I was a single mother, and it was just really tough. So I only sold homes for a couple of years, and I just realized it wasn't for me at that moment. So I put my license on inactive status for years. Went back to Westminster College, got my degree in communication and art, and worked for a Boys and Girls Club, worked for Channel 2 for 10 years. And when my little babies, when I very first started real estate, decided they wanted to buy homes, it was time for me to renew my license. So I grew up in Salt Lake. I live like 5 minutes from where I grew up in Rose Park. I live in Sugar House now. When my kids started buying homes, it was about year 2000. I got my license. I was just doing other things. I was kind of a part-time agent, still working at Channel 2, doing some things, worked for the Salvation Army for a little while, just because I knew I wanted to help people. I wanted to do something to give back. But as time went on, I was with Coldwell Banker for 10 years, from 2000 till about 2010. And then I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I started getting phone calls from Century 21. And I'm thinking, why would they want me? I don't even sell very many homes. But that's when Jared Blank was calling, you were calling, John was calling. And I'm so grateful that you didn't give up on me, because it was probably about the 7th call. I'm like, okay, I'll go see what you guys are about. I sat down with John, and we had a really good conversation. And I'm like, this is where I just need to be. I need to be here. John talked about the 3-legged stool. God, I get emotional when I think about it. The 3-legged stool is just creating balance. And I really, really needed that in my life at that time. It's about my family, my fitness, and my finances. And I always go back to that day when I sat down with John here on the second floor in that little room. And the next day I came to the morning ascent and I'm like, well, this is different. But I just loved it. And I've just never looked back. And that's kind of how I got into real estate and where I am today.
That is
Yeah.
awesome, Brenda Lee. That is so great. What a great story. I had forgotten about the fact that you'd sat down with John and then
Yep.
you came into the crazy stuff of the morning meeting and
Yep.
and to your point, so many people engage in it and some people don't. Let me ask you this way. How you've stayed so engaged now for a decade with Everest and C21, everything that we're doing. What's kept you so committed to morning meetings, committed to showing up at every summit? I mean, you're on almost every morning ascent that's even on now. Most of them obviously are on Zoom. I mean, you show up at the ESS stuff we're doing, which we have later today at 10 a.m. for 2.5 hours. Like what's kept you dialed in? What is it that makes you stay the course when, I mean, most people would say, my gosh, you've arrived, Brenda Lee. You've already got it all figured out. Look, you're making a ton of money. You've got all these great investment properties. Life is pretty darn good. What keeps you engaged? Why do you keep coming back, if you'd say, to the trough or whatever you want to call it?
Oh my gosh. It's just like we've said, you're more of a personal development company here at Century 21 that we just happen to sell real estate. And I need that constantly. And I just so appreciate it. I just love the atmosphere here. I always have to stay in my grateful mind versus my fearful mind. And I think it's imperative that I have that daily. I know when I get away from it, sometimes I do drift away for a little while and I start to see things change for me. So I know it does make a difference. I love the morning affirmations. It just makes me tick. All of the great people we have here, all of the guidance and direction I get. I work more with Rick than anyone, and I sure appreciate him. I think one of my favorite things to say is, hey, it's my first day in real estate. And I don't mean that in a condescending, strange way, but it's like I always have something to learn. And I don't care how many deals I'll ever do, it always seems like there's something new and something I encounter that I never thought I ever would. And I just really appreciate that correspondence and, those stories that can help me because I know I don't know it all. But yeah, I don't ever want to be away from it. It's funny when you say that, we get calls from other companies and they want to recruit us. And I got one about a month ago and gals, asking me, I'm like, oh no, I'm not going anywhere. I love it here at Century 21. She goes, everyone tells me that. Tell me what is so special about that place. What's going on over there? And I started to tell her. I talked about, the personal development, the morning meetings, all the support, the guidance and direction we get here at Century 21. And the more I talked to her about it, the more grateful I became. And it was just really interesting. And I ended up saying, hey, thanks so much for calling me. I got to get back to work now. But it really is a special place.
Yeah. Well, and you've seen that, right? You've seen people who consistently plug in. Then there's people who somewhat plug in and then they kind of fade away. What encouragement would you give for someone to just stay the course? What words of counsel would you give in regards to just the fact that it's so easy to get off the mark, or one, either we get discouraged, we get sometimes it's too early, it's not my thing, or I'm just not sure, or gosh, I don't know if this is doing anything for me. Just anything down that path of encouragement for staying the course.
Geez, I just know when I get off track, what happens to me, but I just always, my mantra is submit to the process. Submit to the process because you just, if you don't treat it like a job, there's so many things I could start to say about what kind of ideas, but I love the thing, be more curious, less judgmental, things like this, just things that roll through my mind all the time that keep me engaged. I love the morning ascent. I always learn, and some people say, well, we've heard that. We've heard it 1,000 times. We don't need to keep hearing it, but I do need to keep hearing it. And I just think you just need to focus on the things that make sense to you, focus on the things you can control. And, you see so many people come and go in this business, but those that do stay the course, it will work, but it's not an overnight success. I mean, I'd say you need to give it 5 years. You need to really buckle down and just work the process.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and hence our statement: those who stay will be champions. And
Yes.
there's such wisdom in that statement. You know, it's so funny that you brought that up. I mean, how ironic is this morning? I'm driving out of my driveway, and I said to myself, "Stop resisting and submit to the process." That is so funny you said that. And I mean, here we are, these many years in this business, and I'm still can feel at moments that resistance that prevents us. We, you know, you feel resistance, and we feel resistance when it's about our health. We'll feel resistance when it comes down to our finances or working this business or making phone calls. We'll feel resistance when it comes to things in regards to relationships that sometimes oftentimes can be very scary. So it's crazy though that when we drop that resistance, it is such a special place where we can live life. In this place, what you mentioned perfectly said is the gratitude begins to just emanate, and we begin to live this extraordinary life that we truly design on purpose.
Right.
So let's switch gears. So talk to us about a little bit about your investments. I know that's something that's been important to you. What counsel would you give in regards to what counsel would you give? What advice would you give in regards to investing in real estate? How many properties do you have today, or doors?
I have 18 doors.
So you have 18 doors.
Mhm.
And what would you say? Sorry, my little thing came up on the screen. What would you say is the best counsel you could give to someone who wants to invest, someone who wants to extend their real estate portfolio, whether it be one property or obviously 18 doors, just like yourself, and obviously still continuing to grow? What would you say to them?
Well, thank you for asking me that. So people say, how in the world did you ever get 18 doors? You know, I'm like, well, I started with one, and it was a home I lived in, and I knew I wanted to buy another home. And so I just kept that as my first investment. And then it just kind of grew. I bought a few that I thought I was going to flip in 2008. And then all of a sudden, the market obviously didn't really submit to that. I bought them on interest only loans. I don't even know if those are out there or exist anymore, but I figured, well, look, I've done self-directed IRAs as well. That's how two of my properties are owned. So if you have money in investments, I don't know about stocks and bonds, but I do know about real estate. So, and a good example on that one would be when my father passed away, my sister, brother, and I each got a little chunk of money. And I own a condo in the Willows, and the lady next door, they are attached. And the lady next door, I knew she wanted to sell hers. Well, I got $129,000 in cash. My brother and sister put their money in stocks and bonds. They didn't feel comfortable. And I'm like, hey, I can help you find a property. I bought that property with that cash I got for 129,000. I called her. I said, "Hey, look, the market was at that point about 135. This was in 2016. I bought that property from her. I said, no commissions, whatever. I'll just buy it straight out from you. Bought it for 129,000. I now rent it for 1,400 a month. I do pay a little HOA. So that condo now will sell for 250,000. My brother and sister still have their $129,000 tucked away in that IRA. And I asked my sister the other day, what is your value on that right now? And she goes, oh, about 150. Well, now I have a $250,000 property. Plus, I have all of the monies that I've accumulated for 4 years in rents. And so investments are
Plus
just the only thing I
depreciation,
do know.
plus the depreciation, plus the tax benefits.
The write-offs. In fact, my CPA says, oh my gosh, Brenda, I've got to start buying some properties because this is working so golden for you. As a real estate agent and I manage my own properties. I know that's probably not a good thing. Phil will always tell me you're stepping over dollars to pick up dimes, but I'm kind of a control freak and I have to touch it. I have to fill it. I have people that help me oversee the properties to actually fix them and whatnot. But my goal is to have $15,000 in passive income within the next few years. And hopefully at that point, if I'm slowing down in selling real estate, because I am 61, that I will have, that is
You're
kind
in
of
your
my,
prime, your prime, Brenda
yeah,
Lee.
I'm in the prime, but I love real estate. I love
So
my
let's go.
properties.
Hold on. So let's go back. Let's go back because you said something very. And it's the counsel that I give to every single agent who will hear the sound of my voice. At minimum, buy one property per year. That's
Yep.
it. One.
Yep.
Don't get into this. I got to buy 10 properties this year, so now I'm just like Brenda Lee. No, one. Just one.
That is so.
And
That
I'm
is
watching.
important. Yeah.
And Brenda Lee, I'm watching my own daughter do this, and her husband Dylan. I'm watching the two of them go through this process, and they just bought their second property. They bought a property from Dave Parker, one of the ones that he was flipping. Bought that property. They lived in it for a year or so. Bought this property, and to your point, they have $100,000+ of equity in that home. And I think to myself, man, I wish at 24 years old I had figured that out. But the best advice I could give to anybody, and I think you said it, start with one. And I would add to buy one property per year, find a property. I remember one of our dear friends, Mike Harris, he works right down there on your floor. I remember he started buying $40,000 condos, and he would just pay off a 1-bedroom, 1-bath, $40,000 condo up in Ogden. And he started buying 2 or 3 or 4 of these. And then it springboarded into all these other great things he's done. So the thing I watch is people get so make it so complicated, and it's just simple. Buy one property per year. That's it. Don't complicate it more than that.
And I'm very excited because of my 18 doors. I mean, some were inherited, some I own with a few other people. Not important, but my goal now is to get them all paid off, and I'm down to 3 properties not paid off. So I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's incredible. And hence the fact we talk about these 2 principles, assets and cash flow. And because you have cash flow, you can pay them off. If you don't have significant cash flow, you can't pay them off. So the thing that's interesting is I watch a lot of people who will say, oh, I'm just going to go buy the properties, but they haven't created a cash stream in the game of real estate. So we can't just invest, in my opinion. We need to learn how to sell so we have cash flow. And then we also invest, and we bring those 2 things together. The rest is history. Literally, we will rock and roll, and we will kick butt, take names in regards to assets and cash flow.
Yep.
Cool. All right, let's switch gears. So what would you tell someone who, believe it or not, even in today's market, there are agents who are struggling, whether it be the issues of COVID, the political side of things, the civil unrest, the challenges of who's our president and all the other crazy stuff that's going on. What would you say to someone as to how to stay focused or how to get out of a funk? Because there's still agents, believe it or not, in a white hot market like today that are still struggling to figure out how to sell real estate and to make it happen in today's marketplace. What counsel would you give to them?
Geez, everything you've always told us. Be careful who you hang with. When I hang with people that are negative, it brings me down. So I have to make changes that way. And even sometimes my own family, I have to be careful how that all rolls. So be careful who you hang with, what you watch, what you listen to, what you're reading. It's also true. When I get away from that, funny story, I would watch the Morning Express. Her name's Robin Meade. It's like, good morning, sunshine, that gal. And it was more of a light news day kind of message, usually more positive. So I'd watch that in the morning, turn it on. Well, when I'd turn it off, it was on that same channel. When I'd come home, I'd flip on the TV. Well, and guess what was on? Forensic Files. So it would just be in the background and I'd be listening to it. All of a sudden, I could see day by day something was happening and I was getting fearful. I was getting more anxious. Things just weren't flowing. And all of a sudden,
Right.
I turned on Forensic File and it hit me. I cannot watch Forensic File anymore. And I immediately changed it. So I would, in the morning when I'd watch the Robin Meade, I would change the channel intentionally when I would leave in the morning. So I didn't ever have a chance of even flipping on Forensic Files. It's amazing what those kind of things will do. And I know you've always said, my voice is not the first voice I want to hear in the morning. So that's another thing. Have something ready to listen to first thing in the morning, whether it be a Les Brown, a Zig Ziglar, or Jim Rohn. there's just all kinds of good information that you can just get yourself out of that funk. Get up in
Yeah.
your house in the morning and dance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's not, to your point, it's not that you don't know these things, right? It's not that you haven't listened to an Earl Nightingale or a Jim Rohn or a Les Brown or a Zig Ziglar or a daily message, or you haven't been to a summit or a morning ascent or whatever, or a thing just like we're doing a morning ascent, just like this morning. You know those answers. The thing I always appreciated is that statement by Socrates, who said, learning is remembering.
Yeah.
And so what's critical is what I'm hearing you say is, look, I'm listening to some of this stuff over and over and over again. And yet sometimes maybe I don't feel like listening to it, but it reminds you, or reminds us, whoever's doing it, right? Reminds us where we're trying to take our lives, reminds us of who we're capable of being, reminds us of the positive attitude we need to create, reminds us of the skill sets we need to build. So important. I think it's so important what you said.
Yep. It is so true. And it's interesting when people say, oh, I've heard that, I don't need to do that. And I said, yeah, but you're different now. You heard it a month ago, but now you're different. You're going to listen to it in a different way. And it's
Yeah.
very true.
Right. As they say, that the same man or woman never crosses the same river twice, because the river changes and so does the man or woman. Yeah. And that's the beauty of this type of activity that you're doing. So let's switch gears again. So tell me, in regards to your daily schedule, what would you say is the primary things that you're doing in your day to keep, going from 10 properties to 40 or 50 homes a year, earning $400,000, $500,000 a year? What is it within your schedule that has become the most important things that you've done? What would you give as counsel to us as to saying, hey, pay real close attention to this part of your schedule?
Submit to the process. I always say you can't make chocolate chip cookies without chocolate chips, and prospecting are the chips to selling homes. If I am not here in my office, I've always said that you can't make chocolate chip cookies without chocolate chips. And they're like, well, of course you can't. Well, then you're not making chocolate chip cookies. And I really believe prospecting. I am so dedicated to being here in my office and calling and prospecting that if a client wants to go, well, hey, I want to go look at this house at 10 o'clock in the morning, I start to feel panicked. I'm like, I can't show a house at 10 in the morning. I'm prospecting. I mean, literally, where my thinking should be, great, let's go buy you a house. Instead, I'm like, well, could you do it at 2? I don't want to mess up my schedule, because if I go show houses at 10, I may not come back and start calling at 2. But I really treat this like a job, and you have to realize this is a job. People have said, the best thing about being your own real estate agent, running your own business, having your own schedule, the very best thing about that is that you have your free time. But it's the very worst thing too. It can be the very worst thing if you're not dedicated and committed to making your schedule work. And prospecting is the most, I keep looking over here because it's all my stuff, all my prospecting stuff. And I just tell you, it's key. And I can be on the phone.
So on average, take a given week, Brenda. On average, how many hours or contacts would you say that you're prospecting per week on average?
I would say I'm prospecting 3 to 4 hours a day. If I'm not out on an appointment or showing homes, I'm here making phone calls. I mean, I can be making phone calls at 6 at night.
Okay, so I've said this, the key to a great real estate career is 15 plus hours a week of prospecting. Obviously, you're doing that. That's evident.
Yep.
So talk about sources that you're going after. What would you say is some of the sources that you have found to be most effective for you and for your business?
My SOI. My SOI.
How? Say it again. I'm like, the most important asset we'll all build. That's right.
Call your SOI. Call your SOI. Call your SOI. Because they're people that know me, they love me, and they refer me. If they don't now, I'm hopeful that that's what will happen. And I think, I don't want to say it's a great thing, and maybe it's not, but that's all I call is SOI. And so if someone calls on one of my property, they end up in my SOI. So they're a part of my SOI.
So you're constantly, I always say this, add 1 or 2 people. I was just saying this to I was just saying this on to a coaching client yesterday. I said, adding one or two sphere of influence per day with the prospecting that you're doing. When you find that person that there's a connection, they seem like a reasonable person, and you start building this army of people that goes along.
So I have to share this when you're talking about that. I had just a short story. I'll make it as short as possible. Gal calls me on a listing I have. We start talking and she's asking me questions, kind of picking my brain. And I'm like, I could see that we kind of had a little connection. And I'm like, well, I'd love to keep in touch with you. Oh, no, I have a real estate agent. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, that's great. Well, do you mind if I just kind of follow up with you and let you know what's going on with this home? She says, that would be fine. Well, through that process, I said, well, I'll give you a call in a few months. She goes into my SOI. She didn't want to give me her email, but I had her phone number. I found out where she lived. I just by Googling her name into search, I had her address. I call her 3 months later. We chat a little bit and I'm like, okay, well, I'll keep in touch with you. I use the Ford, you know, the family, the occupation, the recreation and the dreams. I try to roll around that. If I have something important to talk to my SOI, I try to keep that fresh. I don't want to just call and say, hey, who do you know that wants to buy or sell real estate? Because that's not what my SOI wants to hear from me. I try to give them valuable information, but by reaching out to her and just kind of establishing that integrity level, like when I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. She started to trust me. After the third phone call, she refers her sister and her brother-in-law to me. I sold them a condo. Then her mother had to sell her condo. Then the brother sold his house, bought another house. Then she ended up selling her home and buying another one. Through that one contact, it's just amazing what can happen. I actually had sold 7 property from me, having that relationship with her, building that rapport. She became to trust me. I still call her. She's moved to Montana now. She's like, well, I know she doesn't have anyone, you know, right now that she wants to refer to me, but that will change. And she knows that I'm her contact for real estate. And that's how it
I
works.
love that.
SOA might not be, the SOI might not be immediate, but I will tell you, I have never bought one lead ever. I have never paid for a lead because if I did, I don't know where I would have time to call them. I am so busy calling everyone that I want to talk to that it's just, it's, it's an awesome way to go, your SOI.
Well, it's the single greatest asset that you're going to build. And you've heard me say this for years, because I had a big smile on my face as you were speaking. I'm like, my goodness gracious, you could speak for me. I'm gonna, if I lost my voice, Brenda Lee, you're going to be my voice, just so
Okay.
you know. All right.
There.
You've heard me say this. If you are not increasing your sales prices, if your business is not getting easier, and if you are not getting referrals from your sphere, something's wrong. If people are asking you, I always say this, if people ask, the third is, if people are still asking you, hey, so what are you doing? Are you in real estate? You know something's wrong if they're asking if you're in real estate. That means you're not talking to them. So if the business isn't getting easier, if your sales prices aren't going up, and people are still asking you if you're in real estate, something's off the mark when it comes to your sphere. And it is the single most important asset you will ever build in the game of real estate. Love it. Absolutely love it. So before you started, was your sphere I actually don't know the answer to this. Was your sphere the very thing that you always have done? But was there a time where you called other things besides your sphere?
Absolutely. I've called expired. I've called just listed, just sold. I did for sale by owners, but no one likes rejection. And I felt like I got so much rejection. I started to shift over to my SOI. April asked how many are in my SOI. Well, I use an Excel. I use a different system on my calling, but I probably have over 2,000 names and numbers. They're not all people that I contact on a regular basis. Like my very best, my A list, I maybe call them once a month. But on typically I call them every 3 months. And I probably have, like I say, over 2,000. But part of that whole transition is always adding new people to that list. And not being afraid to get rid of ones. If I pick up one, I use a paper system. If I pick up a paper on my SOI and I'm just like, ooh, I just don't want to talk to them, I throw it away. I'm like, I am not going to call. It makes me feel bad when I look at this, or for some reason we just didn't have a
Yeah.
connection, or I call them and they're like, no, Brenda, I don't have anyone that wants to buy or sell real estate. I'm like, yeah, it scares me. Someone asked about the
So
Ford.
you're,
So
you're
the Ford process is friends and family. The O is their occupation. R is recreation, and D is dreams. So when you're talking, I think of the Ford. I may not talk with my SOI on every single one of those items, but when I do talk with them and they're like, oh, we're going to Hawaii for a wedding, I write it down. And when I call them 3 months later, I'm like, hey, how was the wedding in Hawaii? Now, would I have remembered that they were going to a wedding in Hawaii? Because I talk to a lot of people. So by writing it down, I'm old too. I can't remember everything. That
well,
it just
but
plugs my
let's make
memory.
sure you're. I know in today's world, but I love it because I don't care if we're talking about my daughter Kenzie or we're talking about Lindsay. I mean, every time they're asked, "How do you follow up on these recruits and leads?" and I love it. They're like, "Still old school, using a piece of paper." Shockingly. So,
Shockingly.
I mean, I've right. So you're using paper, right? That's your lead form. That's your lead, right? You have a piece of paper on every one of those sphere, right? And then let me just add this to that is the Ford. So no matter where we are, guys, and I've taught this for years, whether we're at a dinner party, a social gathering, you meet a friend, and people go, oh, "Gosh, I don't know what to say," or that moment of silence that seems so strange. Ask about their family and friends. Ask about their occupations. How's your job going? So I always, as you talk about this, Brenda Lee, right? I would say, hey, Brenda Lee, hey, how's the new job? How like you, or hey, how's work going for you? Or how's your family doing? Everybody healthy in today's marketplace. How's you got any trips planned in the future? Great. How are you? And my favorite question: how are you using real estate to build your financial future? How are you building real estate to build your financial future? Guys, that question should be asked by every agent to every person out there that they talk to. How are you using real estate to build your future?
That's awesome. And so when I call a lot of my SOI, I'm getting a voicemail, but I don't care. People listen to their voicemail. Sometimes I'll mix it up. I'll call, I'll email, I'll text. So I don't do the same thing every time. So I'm reaching them different ways. But
So you're
if
making
I,
a notes that, hey, I called them, left them a message, or hey, I spoke to them, or I
yep,
text them, and you're mixing.
yep.
I just want to make sure. I know I'm cutting you off, but I want to make sure
Oh,
people
yeah.
hear that. You're
I
mixing it up, keeping track of what you did last time.
I have my own little system. I put a T for text, very easy, an M for message. And if I talk with them, usually I write all good. So
Okay.
they know. Yep. But the one thing I did want to say, I know we're running close to being out of time.
Yep.
My SOI, and when I'm talking with people, if I get their voicemail, my message right now is, gosh, I hope you're healthy and happy and everything is good. But when I put my notes down, I'm not going to say that every time, because there's some people I've not talked to for 2 years, but I'm leaving them messages. I send them a calendar once a year. I'm having some conversation with them. And then out of the blue, they pick up the phone and call me. So they know I'm still engaged. I never give up on anyone that if I'm just leaving them messages and haven't spoken with them. And the other really big key thing, when I'm talking to my sphere of influence and they need to sell a home, the one thing I always say, have you ever thought about keeping that and renting? Well, that kind of throws them. But I really do feel home ownership, renting is the way to go. Most of them will say, well, how would you be involved with that? And I'm like, well, I may not be, but if it's the best thing for you, that builds so much trust with them. And it may not be the right thing now in this market. They have so much equity, but 10 years ago, it wasn't that way. And it
Right.
was it was good for them to keep their home. But then when they decided to sell, that's always a question I ask. Have you ever thought about keeping it? And now when I'm working with first-time home buyers, I'm trying to talk to them about, this would be a great rental. You keep this home, live in it for 2 years, start saving some more money for another down payment, and we'll get you into another home. If I talk with them while I'm
Sure.
showing them homes. Have you ever thought about being an investor? Have you ever thought about wanting to own some properties? Because I believe in it that much.
So you're
So
having meaningful conversations
Mhm.
that are relevant to their future, and that you're putting the client before your own needs. But the reality is you help them get, the words of Zig Ziglar, right? Help enough people get what they want, you're going to get what you want. I
It's a
love it.
win. Yep.
You know, it's such a, and you know, one thing I would mention on messaging right now, you mentioned, and then we'll wrap up, and I want you get your thoughts together. I want you to give us your last thoughts, but here's just one thought from my last thoughts on messaging. In any of the messaging to our sphere of influence, to any really potential client, just remember three core things right now about when we're talking speaking. One is the message itself. Is it timely? Is it relevant? Number two is the tonality that you're using. The tone of that message, again, is the timing right in regard the tone right on that. And then third is the timing, right? I'm watching, it'd be like sending a spring postcard during the middle of the winter. Is the timing correctly or correct? So make sure your timing is correct, make sure your message is correct, and make sure the tonality of your message is correct. Tone, message, timing. Okay. Give us your final thoughts, Brenda Lee, as we wrap up. We'll jump into some affirmations.
So probably in wrapping up, just some of my favorite little quotes and thoughts is one by Gandhi. It says, happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do are all in line. So I'm always thinking about that. As what I'm thinking, what I'm doing, and what I'm saying, are they all meshing? When they are, I am the very most happy. I would encourage people to contribute. I'm a member and kind of one of the pushers for our foundation. And I appreciate that you took that so serious those many years ago when I'm like, hey, we need a foundation. Please contribute to the foundation. Or, you know, we're all so blessed and we all have so much that we really, you know, do need to give back. And that makes me feel good to be able to give back.
Yes.
And
And
then
the
the
minimum,
only
right? Minimum $21 per transaction. Good gravy.
20,
If every do that,
yeah.
I mean, give perspective, Brenda Lee. We sell nearly 10,000 homes. If every agent just contributed $21 a deal, imagine the amount of lives that would be impacted for good. The amount of agents sometimes when they're having very difficult moments. I mean, we've had people's homes burned down. We've had all sorts of crazy things where the foundation has stepped in not only to help our own agents, but to help great causes and people who are suffering. So, gosh, at a minimum, $21 per transaction at a minimum.
Yep. The only other thing I'd just say, there's plenty for everyone. I love how we're all so helpful to each other here. And one of my other mantras is I accept good graciously into my life, and all of my needs are met now and always. There is a lot of abundance, and I think it's just if you can think about abundance and focus on the good things. Your message this morning was awesome. And I'll leave with this. Winners focus on the rewards of success. Losers focus on the penalties of failure. And that is always,
That's
it was a little fortune cookie that was on the top of a fortune. It was out of a fortune from a fortune cookie on the top of Jay Bentley's computer one morning. And I'm like, what does that say? And I've never forgot it. You have to focus on the good and what you want. Don't focus on the what ifs, and then just stay in your grateful mind to get rid of fear.
Love it.
Thank you for having me this morning.
Absolutely,
I appreciate
Brenda
it.
Lee. You are amazing. We love you so much and so grateful for your friendship and all the many years that we've been able to work together. So grateful for you. So thank you for spending time with us. And I know who you are in your heart and your soul. I know that if anyone wanted to reach out to you, they could, and you'd be more than willing to help them any way you can.
Yes.
All right, let's rock and roll with some affirmations. We'll finish up strong. Here we go.